What's up, guys? Frosty Aussie here today with another Frosty Features. So we hit that fun in between time where we aren't updating a current team. So we got a sub request, a channel point redemption request that you can do on Twitch. So today, Shark12345 has requested that we cover Captain Britain's sister, Psylocke. So we are going to go over that. So if you haven't been to a Frosty Features before, what this is the comic book background on the tunes that you use in Marvel Strike Force, and I am your humble guy. So typically we do it according to Scopely. Psylocke's an older character from way back in the day, so I was having trouble finding a blog post that has her actual factual lore, Marvel Strike Force lore description, so there isn't one here. So we usually rate these at the end, so there's not much to do in that regard. The one thing I can say is, we'll talk about this in detail. The Psylocke that we have in game is very important to note that it is Betsy Braddock. It is Elizabeth Betsy Braddock. This is the sister to Brian Braddock, who is Captain Britain. She is also a member of our Death Seed team that for some reason still randomly will show up, at least in where I'm at in Cosmic Crucible, but for the most part she's part of a dead team. But she's very popular in the comics and often talked about in her few appearances in movies, so maybe there's a rework in the future, who knows, but here we are. So this is Elizabeth Betsy Braddock. Yes, first appearance, Captain Britain number 8 in 1976. She's around for quite a while before we see her become Psylocke. It's almost 10 years, I believe. So she is Brian's sister, and she has kind of a limited level of telepathic abilities. And then as her story kind of goes on, what happens is Captain Britain is in his own series for a while, and then after he crosses over to the United States, that series dissolves and kind of becomes it gets kind of pushed in with like the X-Men issues and things like that, and her popularity starts to rise. She kind of starts as a sidekick as Captain Britain, but her popularity starts to gain, and with that she kind of becomes her own character and starts joining in things like Strike and Excalibur or whatever. And so with that, she dyes her hair purple and becomes kind of more or less becomes Psylocke. We'll talk about that more in detail, but yeah. So powers and abilities. She is a telepath. As it says in the comics, she's one of the strongest telepaths on the planet because of a body swapping mind swap meld thing with Jean Grey. Psylocke has this thing where she kind of she mind swaps people, and when she does so, she sort of like takes some of their DNA kind of, and that changes her powers around. It's not as well as explained as some of the other mutant powers and things like that, but when she does, this is kind of a popular trope with her, and it's really important to note because there are two Psylocks in Marvel 616 canon, so it's something to keep in mind. So telepathy, psychic powers, telekinetic powers, flight, and more. Her power set changes quite a bit. Typically it is centered around some form of psychic powers, whatever. Most notably, she has her psi daggers that she uses to fight with and such. So there's that. Aliases: Psylocke. She has a stint as Captain Britain. I actually think she might currently be Captain Britain. And Lady Mandarin, which is when she first gets the name Psylocke. This is actually she very soon after she becomes Psylocke, she operates the Lady Mandarin for a short period of time, but it's not Betsy Braddock, but it is Betsy Braddock. Affiliations: a lot. She's affiliated a lot. Excalibur, Captain Britain Corps, X-Men, X-Force, the Four Horsemen, the Hand, and others. So today we're going to focus heavily on her X-Men affiliation and the Four Horsemen, and no, that's really it. But she's been around for a while, so she's been affiliated all over the place. Background: Malden, Essex, England. She is the twin brother to Brian Braddock, Captain Britain, and the younger sister, she's not the twin brother, she's the sister to her twin brother. And then her older brother, Jamie Braddock, who we talked about in the Captain Britain feature a little bit. But yes, so they are twins. She's closer with Jamie Braddock, which, you know, same that when you're a twin, your origin stories are pretty similar. So the Captain Britain situation is that you can't be a superhero, supervillain without somebody dying. And in the case of Captain Britain and Psylocke, their parents died, which led to events that made them become superheroes, supervillains, what have you. So her parents dying led to Captain Britain becoming Captain Britain, and then her affiliation with Captain Britain led her to becoming Psylocke down the road. For a long time, she is just Betsy Braddock until eventually she gets kidnapped, and we'll talk about it. Doctor Who? So, something I wanted to, this is a cool fun fact about Psylocke. There were some unauthorized crossovers in the early 80s when Doctor Who was owned by Marvel, where Betsy Braddock appears in, and it is the canon Betsy Braddock that appears in some of the Doctor Who comics because, English people were crossing over, English comics were crossing over with other English comics. So there are actually a few early Betsy Braddock appearances with Doctor Who that were totally unsanctioned, not okay, and more or less they just let it slide. Almost Stayed Dead. Another cool comic book history thing is when she got the she drank the Crimson Vial, or I think that's what it's called. Ultimately, there was a potion she was drinking, and it gave her the scar and changed her powers up. And her creator and Captain Britain's creator, Chris Claremont, didn't like that. So when somebody else wrote that in, so Chris Claremont was like, okay, we're not going to do this. I'm going to kill her and bring her back so we can get rid of the scar and we can get rid of, whatever these powers. And he killed her off. And right after he killed her off, Marvel put down a thing that was like, hey, there's like no consequences to people dying in comics. You're not allowed to resurrect people for so long. So she ends up staying dead for a few years because Chris Claremont accidentally killed her at the wrong time. But she ends up getting brought back because she, as far as the comics are concerned, she's actually a very popular character. So we have limited appearances in movies. She's actually one of the most popular characters not featured in next to like Havoc. I guess Havoc's in the movies. But one of the most popular characters that isn't as featured in certain of the other big mainstream games, like other than Marvel vs. Capcom, we don't see her a whole bunch of video games. We don't see her in the X-Men TV series. I haven't watched X-Men 97, so that could change. But she's in it, but she's only in 2 episodes. Very, very limited feature, and I think it's because she has this sort of kind of lusty appearance or whatever, maybe more suggestive. She also definitely serves as a crux for Scott Summers for a while, but that's not Betsy Braddock. Oh. So anyway, relationships. Brian and Jamie Braddock are her brothers. Scott Summers is an ex-lover of hers, sort of, kind of. We'll talk about it. Not really, but yes. Warren Worthington III is an ex-lover of hers. That would be Angel. And then Megan Braddock, who is a member of Excalibur and Brian Braddock's wife. So that is her sister-in-law. So, notable events for Psylocke. So becoming Psylocke is pretty important. I've kind of touched on it a little bit, but what we have is she is running around with her brother, and what happens was at first she's not. So her twin brother is Brian and her older brother is Jamie. She's closer with Jamie than she is Brian. Brian's off doing his own thing after their parents die. Jamie it was a disappointment to his parents, and he ends up becoming a race car driver. And Betsy's really close to him, and then Jamie gets in a crash, and Betsy's pretty sure that he's dead, so she turns to Brian, essentially for a comforter, like, what are we gonna do? And this turns into them becoming kind of partners, because she becomes a pilot randomly. She's a charter pilot, and so they're flying a plane, and then there's a psychic attack where this guy named Dr. Psy puts she's like seeing monsters and all sorts of shit, and she ends up crashing the plane, and that's when Brian reveals that he's Captain Britain and he has to defeat Captain Psy or whatever. So that starts them becoming very close and becoming partners in a superhero kind of sense. So she acts as a sidekick for years and years and years. Eventually, like I said before, when Captain Britain gets kind of meshed into the X-Men comics, when he transfers over to the United States, he doesn't transfer, but like we see his appearance in the United States comics, which greatly affects his character. So ultimately, what ends up happening is she gets kidnapped, or excuse me, while she's working with the X-Men, she gets they fight a guy named Sly Master. This is important for, especially for the picture you see here. So Sly Master ends up ripping her eyeballs out of her head. So instead of trying to get a replacement, some kind of magic mutant or bionic way, she decides to go blind. So there's a short period of time where Psylocke has no eyes and she's fighting without them. But in this time period, it's very short. In this time period, Mojo and Spiral, which is one of Mojo's cronies, kidnap Psylocke and implant bionic eyes into her head, and are using her for one of their TV shows. And so she ends up getting rescued by the X-Men. In this situation, though, Mojo and Spiral actually give her the name Psylocke to go for her Murderverse TV show. So that's actually where she gets the name Psylocke. And after she is rescued by the X-Men. So that's the other thing, is this is theoretically where the body swap happens. So we're going to talk about, I have Tale of Two Psylocks up there. This is theoretical. There's a bunch of retcons here, but also this is implied where the body swap kind of happens. But so ultimately, with all that, she is kind of regular sidekick chick. All that to translate into becoming Psylocke. Her in the Murderverse becoming, getting the name of Psylocke, getting the bionic eyes, things like that. This is her introduction to being Psylocke. And then she becomes affiliated with the X-Men, all to find out that the bionic eyes that Mojo put into her head are cameras, so he can record everything that she's doing and what's going on, and he can spy, but also it can be part of his television show, which is amazing. But so that's essentially how she became Psylocke initially. But then, due to retcons and things like that, there is a body swap. There is and once again, it really depends on which one you look at, but there's a situation where a lot of things, especially in like the Murderverse, things like that happen. A lot of things go down, and I couldn't find a good clip or like a good picture to show us the 90s one, but this is Betsy and the other Psylocke fighting. Kawanin. So with that, somewhere in here, depending on which storyline you're reading, ultimately there's this thing called the Siege Perilous, and the X-Men are allowed to walk through it, and what that does is let them essentially erase their memories and start over, right? So in Psylocke going through this Siege Perilous, she goes through and she wakes up, and she's an Asian lady in Asia. And she has all these, ultimately her mind is in the body of this person named Kawanin, and it is the wife of a high-ranking, the Hand member, and, Matsuo. She's Matsuo's wife. So with that, she wakes up, and so she's just kind of part of the Hand. She doesn't necessarily know who she is for a while, whatever. And eventually with the Hands kind of, so she becomes a Hand assassin for quite a long period of time, until she runs into the X-Men by this same association. And so with this, she's using her side daggers, and she stabs Wolverine, getting kind of a glimpse into her past through the eyes of Wolverine, seeing that she's not actually supposed to be a Hand, but she is Betsy Braddock, but she's in a different body. So what had happened was, Matsuo kind of set it up for when the Siege Perilous came through. Kawanin was dying, and I'm probably saying those names all wrong, by the way. She was dying, brain dead, and they're like, okay, well, this person's coming through. We're gonna body swap them so that I can save my wife. But they were wrong, and Kawanin actually lived. That's why she was out by herself on this beach, and ended up becoming an assassin. So the Betsy Braddock body was elsewhere, serving as Kawanin's main mind, but ultimately both of them got half. So it was like half Betsy Braddock's memories and half of Kawanin's in each body. So they kind of had flipped information. So another really important thing to keep in mind is that before this body swap moment, Psylocke had no martial arts ability, the training with the hand and the mind swapping with Quanon brought that on, right? So, with that, so she kind of automatically gets martial arts abilities and things like that. So the Psylocke we have in the 90s, the Psylocke that ends up being in the love triangle between Scott Summers and Jean Grey, is actually the Quanon body of, but with Betsy Braddock's partial mind. So anyway, there's a bunch of not bipolar, but there's a bit of a personality siege, but it's not quite as like I'm this person. It's more of just like a internal conflict of emotions that Psylocke goes through a lot, which kind of leads her to playing with Scott Summers and being this kind of really like lusty siren-esque figure. So with that, with Quanon being there, she joins the X-Men for a while after she kind of realizes who she's supposed to be, whatever. And then Betsy ends up deciding that Quanon in Betsy's body decides she's gonna hunt down the other Psylocke and ultimately tracks her down to assassinate her. And then they end up being just both joining the X-Men. They realize they had stuff in common. So they both joined the X-Men, and the audiences thought this was super confusing, so the writers ended up, at this point in the 90s, we have the big prevalent feature of the legacy virus, so the Quanon body Psylocke ends up dying, and Betsy's brain is fully back into her body, and she becomes like the one true Psylocke, more or less. So she ends up becoming that kind of remaining Psylocke, and she actually ends up getting all her full powers back, so she becomes stronger, and she gets to retain the martial arts ability, etc., which is the version of Psylocke that we have in the Marvel Universe right now, though I think she's also, because I said in the alias is Lady Mandarin, she's Lady Mandarin while she's in the hand, right? So all that time she was going, after she kind of wakes up on that beach, she kind of takes on that moniker. Yeah, those are two cool things with Psylocke. Psylocke's did a lot. She's got a lot of good reading material. One other thing you might want to check out is there's a situation with a body swap with Jean Grey. It's more recent, which heavily affects this next part of Frosty Features. Because on Frosty Features here, we care about power level, but Marvel Strike Force does not. So the way that this works, if you are a multiversal threat, you can end all of reality as it is known, toppling the multiverse at whim. Universal means you can end your reality, maybe hop on over to another one and end that one. Cosmic means you are a threat on a planetary scale, taking out things like small planetary bodies up to solar systems or galaxies with enough time. Nuclear means you have power equivalent to that of a nuclear bomb, leveling things like small cities all the way up to a planetary building with enough planetary body with enough force. Super Soldier means that you are beyond all human capabilities and past the peak of human ability, leveling things like brick walls or city blocks. City is a human equivalent that is trained to the absolute utter peak of ability. Think Olympic athletes. In Marvel, a lot of our secret agents, mercenaries, etc., ninjas, we're talking about the hand in this, are at this city level. And then there's Greg. Greg is the undead Asgardian that is spawned by Hela and Marvel Strike Force. And without Hela and his friends on the Undying team, Greg is not very good left to his own devices. So, for the sake of argument, just because I think it's funny, we're putting Greg equal to that of a regular human being. So in the event that I was in line at the dump and I had a truckload of wheelbarrows that I wanted to get rid of, and Greg wanted one of those wheelbarrows, I, theoretically being a regular human being and him being an undead Asgardian Greg, I could rip off one of the wooden wheelbarrow handles and use it as a beating club and beat Greg to death. So, with that, Greg is equal to that of a regular human being, and Frosty could beat him. It's canon. I announce it. In the case of Psylocke, the way that this works, Psylocke is a strong telepath, a strong psychic mutant, has the power of flight, and varying forms of telekinesis, force fields, all sorts of things. Here's the thing. With the body swap of Jean Grey, she gets a huge power boost because she gets some of Jean Grey's super crazy powers. Jean Grey, easily a universal character, depending whether or not there's a Phoenix Force included. It can go all the way up to multiversal, right? So So with that, having that sort of body swap, whatever, we have a character who can shoot out energy blasts or force field or whatever on a large scale. Therefore, Psylocke in current comic book context is easily within the nuclear power level. Which I feel like it's been a minute since we've had a pretty solid, somebody solid in the nuclear level. But Psylocke is a very strong mutant. Some debate Omega level, which is the highest level of mutant. So, it's a very, very, very high level of mutant. Yeah, it's the highest, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, nuclear power level, Psylocke, 100%. She's super strong, really crazy, and we'd love to see more of her. And according to Scopely, once again, there's no blog post, so there's not really anything I can rate here. This is in the before times of blog posts. If you can find the blog post, let me know in the comments. But with that was Frosty Features Psylocke. I hope that you all enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments your favorite Psylocke moments, or if I ain't got anything just straight up wrong, that's totally fine too. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe this here on YouTube. It doesn't cost you anything but a couple of clicks. And as a reminder, I stream at the link above on Twitch, where we do Frosty Features live every Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. We do them live. I hope that you all enjoyed this. I hope that you all have a fantastic, fantastic weekend. Most importantly,